Welcome to the Carousel of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Allie Wagner. On last week's episode, we wrapped up our conversation with seer, healer, and artist Cypress Willett. I shared my soul retrieval experience with you, and you learned how to identify the symptoms of soul loss in your own life. Plus, we learned a little bit more about Cypress's artistic contribution to the carousel and how she used ritual to call a $1.25 million house into her experience. On today's episode, I want to share with you a story about something that happened at the carousel in the wee hours of the morning last Friday morning. When I arrived at work, 7 of the carousel animals were missing. I'll tell you what happened on a very special episode of this podcast. Let us begin with today's story. I arrived at the carousel extremely early Friday morning. Truth is, I couldn't sleep the night before. We had thunderstorms all night, which is a very scary affair if you are my puppy. Sure, the puppy is 5 years old now, and he's very, very brave, but he is 100% braver when he sleeps directly on top of my head while panting all night. So needless to say, Friday morning, I was up early, ready to go after hours of being smothered in black fur. When I got out of bed, it was still dark. My family was still sleeping, especially the puppy, because, of course, he had protected us all night from thunder, and he was pretty sleepy. And when I arrived at the carousel, I didn't immediately recognize something was wrong. Maybe it was because of the lack of sleep or because of the lack of light in the carousel house, but I didn't immediately notice that the animals were missing. I sat down, as I often do first thing, in the chair next to Gorilla. I like to talk to Gorilla first thing in the morning, and this morning I told him about my night. How scared the puppy was, how sleepy I was. I told him the things I was working on that day, everything that I was excited about. I thanked him for listening. I thanked him for never interrupting. He smiled back at me. Then I gave him a quick peck on the cheek and got ready to go to work. It was as I was giving Gorilla a high five to start my day that I noticed for the first time Cheetah was missing. Completely gone. There was Panda, and then next to her was nothing. Where was she? Was I going crazy? I then scanned the rest of the carousel. Maybe she had been moved for maintenance. Maybe Paul was working on something that I didn't know about. I looked everywhere, and that's when I realized she wasn't the only one missing. 7 animals were gone. 7. In addition to Cheetah, there was no dolphin, no deer, no dog, no frog, no coyote, and no kangaroo. Everybody was missing. And the Carousel of Happiness hadn't had an escape this significant since, well, never mind about that. The point is, animals aren't regularly missing from the carousel. And when they are, like the elephant a couple of months ago, they almost always make their way back before the humans arrive in the morning. Not having 7 animals on the carousel for what was about to be a very busy summer day, it was a big deal. So I thought about calling my boss, but I decided against it. It was, after all, 6:30 in the morning, and everyone knows that is entirely too early to call your boss, particularly if you have bad news. I did some quick math. Staff would arrive at 9 o'clock, so I had 2.5 hours to find the animals and help them get back to the carousel. That's when I started to look for clues. I noticed one of the big glass doors in the carousel house was slightly open, and there appeared to be a streak of green paint on the edge of the wooden frame. Frog! He must have hopped out of the carousel from here. I opened the door and stepped out into the carousel garden. The sun was just starting to come up. I couldn't see too far in front of me, but I could hear the buzz of hummingbirds all around. Even though it was early, it was already warm. Today was going to be hot, and the hummingbirds were getting an early start. I heard the sound of a car driving toward me. Its headlights sort of flashed me in the eyes before it followed the highway and passed the carousel along the highway. A dog in Old Town started barking in the distance. It seemed like Netherland was starting to wake up. Wake up, yes, of course. I needed to wake up and pay attention if I wanted to find the animals before 9. I looked at my watch. It was already 6:45. Shoot. As the breeze kicked up, a piece of newspaper blew by onto my shoe. It was a news article, carefully cut out with scissors, about swimming in Barker Reservoir. That must be it. The animals were going for a swim in Barker. Last week it had been extremely hot up here, and maybe they just wanted to cool off. I hopped into my truck and drove down to find them. When I got there, I saw Coyote and Dog both chewing on sticks. "What are you doing?" I asked them. They looked at me, then at the sticks. Surely they didn't need to explain this to me. Yes, I know you're chewing on sticks, but what are you doing outside the carousel? Where are the other animals? What is going on? When they didn't answer, I grabbed Dog's stick. Then I grabbed Coyote's. They both looked up at me eagerly now. Then they looked at the reservoir. Couldn't I just throw the sticks in the water just once, pretty please? You know I can't throw it. No one is allowed to swim in Barker Reservoir. Everybody knows Barker is Boulder's drinking water, and people swimming in it could ruin it for them. That doesn't make sense, Coyote said. People down in Boulder swim in the exact same water in the creek all the time. Yes, I know. Humans don't always make sense now, do they? I lured Coyote and Dog into the back of my truck with the 2 sticks. They chewed on them happily as I drove them back to the carousel. As I started to enter the roundabout and move in a circle, both animals stopped chewing immediately and started bobbing up and down, just like they were on a carousel. Habit, Coyote explained. I pulled into the shopping center parking lot, turned to both canines in the back seat, and said, "Where are the other animals?" Just as I asked that question, though, I saw Frog hopping across Boulder Creek Lodge's parking lot on the way down to the pedestrian bridge. I turned back to both dogs. "You can take your sticks, but I need you to go back into the carousel and find your spot, please." They didn't argue. Ran back into the carousel as soon as I opened the door. I sprinted across the parking lot, trying to catch up with the Frog. He had hopped onto the side of the bridge and was looking like he was about to jump. "Don't jump!" I cried. Frog looked at me, confused. "Please don't jump. We need you at the carousel. You are important," I said. He looked even more confused. "You know I can swim, right? And also the creek is not that deep." Yes, of course. "Of course," I said. "I didn't mean it in that way. I need you to come back to the carousel right now. It's summer. It's Friday. There's going to be so many people who want to ride you. Please come back. We need all of the help we can get today." Frog pointed to the creek. In it rolled a very happy and very wet dolphin. "Dolphin, what are you doing? You can't swim in that water." "Why not?" she asked. "They swim in this water down in Boulder." "Yes, I know, but humans are silly, etc., etc. I need you and Frog to go back to the carousel right now. We have, and I looked at my watch, it was 7:30. We have an hour and a half before Fred and Pat come in to open the carousel, and we're still missing Deer and Kangaroo. Don't forget Cheetah. She's missing too. Ribbit, said the frog. How do you know she's missing? Well, I saw her chasing a mountain lion down First Street. A mountain lion? Why was she chasing a mountain lion? My heart started to pound. Maybe I should have called my boss. What was I going to do? Ribbit, said Frog. I looked at both of them sternly. I know it's hot. I know you want to swim, but please go back to the carousel and find your places before Fred and Pat get here. Please, please, please. Frog hopped down onto Dolphin's back in the creek. The pair floated underneath the bridge before they found an eddy. Frog hopped onto the bank, stretched out his hand for Dolphin, who grabbed it with her flipper, and before I even knew it, he whipped her onto his back. He took a few wobbly hops at the direction of the carousel before he found his stride. Hop, 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 they went, back to the carousel in the early morning light. I continued across the bridge and turned east down First Street. It was empty except for a lone Subaru wagon parked in front of Decent Bagel. On the back of its windshield, there was a hand-drawn flyer. In uneven lettering, it read, "Lost Cat." I read the flyer. Apparently, Mr. Snugglesworth had been missing since Tuesday. He was a 19-year-old orange tabby whose pastimes included chasing butterflies and napping in the sun. Any and all information about his whereabouts should be texted to the number below. Attached to the flyer was a faded picture of a chubby orange cat with what appeared to be a mohawk. That's when I noticed a small dish on the ground by the back bumper of the Subaru. It was filled with milk. For Mr. Snugglesworth, no doubt. I peeked into the car window and saw the driver fast asleep in the front seat, clutching what appeared to be a scratching post. Just then, the car started to jiggle slightly. It started to rumble back and forth. Well, what? What was going on? And that's when I heard a long, low, guttural growl. Actually, it wasn't really a growl exactly. It was more like a massive purr. I looked up in just enough time to see Cheetah rubbing her head and body along the passenger side of the Subaru, just like she were a cat. Her considerable weight jostled the car back and forth, though it did not notably wake up the driver. "Cheetah," I whispered to her. "What are you doing?" She looked up at me with a face covered in milk. Then she looked down at the dish on the ground. Wasn't it obvious what she was doing? "Why aren't you at the carousel?" I asked her. "I was so worried about you. Frog said you were chasing a mountain lion." "Is that what he said?" she asked. "I wasn't chasing a mountain lion. She was chasing me. Thank you very much. We were racing to the post office and back, and you better believe she was behind me the entire time." "So you're not hurt?" "No, I'm not hurt." Cheetah returned to the saucer of milk. After a few dainty licks, she looked up at me and said, Of course I won." Then she went back down to the milk. The driver in the Subaru still slept. I looked over my shoulder and then over the other one. Do you know where the mountain lion went by chance?" I asked her as I sort of cleared my throat. "Home," she said, as if it were totally obvious. "Stop drinking that milk," I whispered to her. "It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to Mr. Snugglesworth. I'm pretty sure he's not here to drink it, if you know what I mean." "Oh no, I covered my mouth with both my hands. Poor Mr. Snugglesworth. I know, Cheetah said. It's such a shame to have lactose intolerance. She went back to the dish. Look, you need to go back to the carousel right now. I looked at my watch. We only have 1 hour left. Cheetah sighed and huffed as she started to slowly amble up First Street on her way back to the carousel. And while I could definitely tell she was taking her sweet time, I did not argue, because it turns out a pouty cheetah is still pretty fast. She moaned. All right. You can have the leftover milk if you want it. Cheetah stopped still, whipped around, snagged the saucer with her paw, and before I knew it, she was gone. Now what? I wondered. Deer and kangaroo were still missing. I had less than an hour before Fred and Pat showed up for the day, and I was going to have to confess that 2 animals were missing. I sighed, and I sat down on the curb. As I sat, I heard the sound of crumpling in my pocket. I reached in and pulled out the news clipping I found in the carousel's garden. The article's title, the one about Barker Reservoir, read, "Barker offers swimmers a respite from summer heat." There was a picture of Barker with no one in it, and the article's author, ChatGPT. I started to crumble the paper into my hand when I noticed another article on the opposite side. The date, July 10th, 2025, full moon in Capricorn. The title read, "What to Expect During Tonight's Buck Moon." The article explained this month's full moon, known as a buck moon because it occurs at the exact time of the year that male deer start growing out their antlers, was encouraging us to step up and claim the version of ourself that was waiting on the other side of healing. And because of a lot of very complicated astrology I don't quite understand, the best way right now with the energies at play was to do something radical, something transgressive. It was to be gentle with ourselves. According to the article, this full moon, we are to honor our gentleness, our tenderness. We are to step back from forcing and efforting and ignore the harsh inner voice within us. This full moon was asking us to honor our softness and assertively preserve our vulnerability at all cost. It went on to highlight the specific full moon horoscopes for different zodiac signs, and that's when I noticed one was circled, Taurus. And the 2 last lines of the horoscope were underlined. You can't find your soul in a masquerade. It's time to slip out the back door and breathe. Instantly, I knew where the deer was. I ran down First Street and headed back to Barker Reservoir. I got to the parking lot and started running down the trail. This trail goes in and out of the trees, up and down along the north side of the reservoir. And while it doesn't go completely around the lake, only to the dam, I knew that there was a possibility that deer might be there. Because I regularly see deer at the dam taking sips of water before that water moves down into the canyon. And I knew deer was a Taurus because we had talked about it before. So I was wondering if maybe he had chosen that location as a place to take that proverbial breath. I arrived at the end of the trail, and there he was, brilliant in the early morning sun. And lo and behold, hopping along right next to him was Kangaroo. I was relieved. Everyone seemed to be okay, and as it turned out, Kangaroo's little Joey snuck out of the carousel last night to see if he could catch the moon. You see, when Joey was carved by Scott originally, he gave the baby kangaroo a moon to hold in both of his hands. But unfortunately, Scott discovered he wasn't able to mount Kangaroo on the carousel with the moon still in Joey's hand, so he had to remove it before they joined the carousel. Joey's never quite gotten over the fact that that moon has been taken away. Kangaroo woke up in the middle of the night to find her Joey gone. She then woke up Deer and asked if he could help her find her son. The two of them looked all over until they found Joey at the dam, trying to use a dog leash as a lasso, doing his best to catch the moon. The four of us walked back to the carousel together, sneaking in the back door just as Fred opened the front door. "Good morning," he said to me. "How we doing this morning?" I shut the carousel gate behind me and looked over my shoulder. Everyone was in their place. Everything was just as it had been the night before, except for a small dish of milk that rested on the ground at the base of the somewhere else wall. Apparently, Cheetah must have left it there for Mr. Snugglesworth. I sat for a moment at the desk, thinking about that poor, missing, lactose-intolerant cat, Mr. Snugglesworth. And that's when I heard Fred yell in the back, "What is a fat orange cat doing in the carousel? This is unacceptable." "Sorry, Fred," I said. "It won't happen again." I ran back into the carousel, grabbed Mr. Snugglesworth, and brought him to his very, very sleepy owner on First Street. And there you have it. Do you believe me? What do you think the animals do at night? If you have a story about the carousel and its animals and what they do at night, shoot me a text. Send me a note. My contact information is in the show notes. In the meantime, take care. Be well. And as we like to say at the Carousel of Happiness, don't delay joy. And we'll see you next time around.
Beginnings and endings are only pretendings. I'll see you next time around. I'll see